Hello friends and everyone, welcome back to the next exciting phase of our e-commerce journey. Previously, we have built a robust and scalable e-commerce API powered by .NET, following clean architecture principles to ensure maintainability and performance. It is fast, secure, and ready to handle complex business logic. But what is an API without a beautiful, intuitive, and dynamic front end to showcase its power? That is why today we are diving into Blazor, Microsoft's modern framework for building interactive web applications. Our goal is very simple. It is to create a stunning and responsive e-commerce client that seamlessly integrates our API. Our API was built in .NET 8, and in our client, we want to use .NET 9. By doing so, I need to create a different project. So I'm going to create a solution, add front end, that's a Blazor WebAssembly standalone, then add another C# library, which will handle all the logics that we'll be using in our component. So let's get going. If you haven't watched any of the videos, don't worry, I'll make them available in the video description, also in a playlist. So you can just go in there and I'll start from 1 to finish. Let's hop in. All right, so you can see from here, we are having our project created. That's our Blazor WebAssembly standalone. And also we have a C# class library added to support our client. Okay, before we tackle the client, I want us to update the API that we created and add, I think one repo or so, I think for category. So we can get the category when we are building the client. So let's open to our old e-commerce API. So mine is ready here, and I believe you've also seen yours. Okay. Now we are using generic repo over here to handle our product and category. But there are some few things that we do not want to put them in the generic because they are specifics. Let's say category specific. It is only related to category. So in here, we need to create an interface and create a repo so we can implement that. I believe you've got the idea, right? So let's do that. Let's create an interface and then let's implement our repo. Okay, so we are having an interface. As you can see, we want to get product by category. So here's the case. I want to provide a category ID and I return all related products. Let's implement this. So in here, we want to grab the product list, and we are not grabbing all the products. We want to sort it out and now get all products which have the ID or category ID as what you're going to provide. After that, we want to return, we are using as no tracking because here we want to only retrieve values. We don't want to track it. And after that, we convert this to a list and I return it. So the last one here, the last sentence that we're doing, this is a statement, right? We want to check if the count is greater than 0, then want to return, it means we have product here. If not, you want to return empty, right? All right, so that's what you want to do here. So after we are done creating this, we need to register this. Since we have an interface and a report here, we quickly go to our program and do that. This is not in the program. Since we are in the infrastructure, we created a service container, and that is where we need to do this. So after we are done with this, we need to go and use this in our service. That is a category service that we created. So let's go to the interface. We add the interface, and we're going then implement the interface in a service. So let's go to the service. That's an interface, and our service can be found in the implementations folder. So let's implement the service. Like we see from here that we are using the category interface. Now, when you use category interface here, I think we're not going to have it because category interface is linked to this I category, which is from the generics. So we need to include our category. So from here, we want to call the service, that is a repo, the interface that we have in here. When we get a product, we want to check. Before we return, we map this. We need to make sure the product response here, it is not null. So we do that to check. In case it isn't, in case it is null, we know what you're doing. In case it isn't, then we want to map it and return it in the state of what? Get product. So that's our DTO. All right, so we need to go to a controller and a user service in a controller. So let's do that. So in the controller endpoint, we have the route specified products by category. Then we provide the category ID that you want to make a search with. When we get the response, we want to check in case there's any, we want to return two status codes here. That is an OK of 200 and a 404 of not found. So in case there's no product associated with that specific category, we want to return not found. Else, you know what we're doing. So this is what we need to add. Now, as time goes on, we will come back again and add more in case we do need them when working with a client. Because, when dealing with a client, you may get more ideas and you need to improve your API as well. So let's hold this here. Now let's go to, so I'm going to minimize this. I'm not going to close it. I'm going to minimize this so it stays alive. And now we make sure our client is open now. Let me make this clean up. I believe you have the same class here. You can decide to keep it or remove it because you're not going to use it. So maybe you can decide to get rid of it. So when you check our client and our API, let me put it again. Okay. Now with the API, if you check our application, we are having DTOs here, right? These are DTOs. Now the DTOs, we're going to use some of the DTOs, but not all. So maybe this is what you can do. In case you have this, you can create a project, a C# class library. Then you can put all the common DTOs which are going to be used by the client and on the server. Then you can put it there so you can make it shared to each. But well, since I am working with a different framework, that's .NET 9, I want to get the important ones, what the recommended ones, what we do need them. I want to create it. Okay, so maybe if you want to skip that, you can do that. So let's go and create our models. What we need specifically in the client, what we need here. Let's do it. And let's put them in the client here. Okay, the client library for the Blazor WebAssembly. So let's create a folder here, and I'll start creating our models. So we have our category created, and we have a category base which contains the most common property used by all, almost, and that is the name property. After that, we have our create category, which inherits from the base, and we need names to handle that. We need our get category, which takes in the ID and also the name. So we're going to inherit from the base. And now we need to get a product list so we can have access to all products related to this specific category. We're going to create a product soon, so don't worry. And after that, we have the update category, which takes in the ID and our name for update. Let's go and create our product. So we also have our CRUD for our product. We have the base, as you can see from here. These are the models that we specified earlier on. And in that, we are having the next one, that is our create product, which directly inherit from the base. We have get product, and with get product, we want to add this property here. Now this property is going to be used in a client. So we don't need this property in the API. So if you decide to use a common details for all, it means you have to create another model for this and integrate it. So you have our is new, telling us that if the product here, it is less than 7 days old, meaning it is still new. For the whole week, we're still going to have a tag new on the product. That is what this is going to do. Okay, we have a created date. Then we have the category, because we want to get a category as well attached to each product. Okay, we have our update product, and as you can see from here, we need an ID attached to the product base properties that we have. Okay, we need this for now because we want to work on product and category. After that, we need to also add authentication, because definitely we're going to log in and log out and register a user. So let's add that. So after we are done with this, we have created our login authentication base, which handles the two common properties that are going to be using most, email and password. And here we can see we are using an attribute here, using the default data annotations, email address and required to make them required when creating or using this in an edit form. We also creating a user which inherit from this authentication base, and in that we are adding the extra properties that we need. And then when you go to login, we're going to be using username and password to log in. So we definitely need to inherit from this authentication base. Great. Now the next thing I'm going to be doing here is we need to create a response, which is going to be a service and login response, which will handle a token and a refresh token, as well as in case you have any extra message that you want to pass it on, plus our state, which is going to be in a Boolean expression. Aside from that, we need to also create our API call model. That is what we're going to be using to populate our API call, and I'll get into our service. So let's do that. So that is our message. That's a service response. We have two properties in here, but when we log in, we will need more properties than this. So let's create a model to handle login. So now we are done with this. Let's go and create our API call model, which will be used to populate a lot of properties for the call. So in here, we are creating a model known as an API call. These are the properties that you want to specify. We're going to be using the type. The type could be get, could be all the HTTP verbs. Based on that, we're going to switch. We have an HTTP client for a client instance. We need to specify our route, which will come from our controller endpoint. Then we need a model. If you're going to create, we need a model to pass it on. If you're going to get, we need just an ID. So we have an ID here. So this could be null. That's the reason why I made this ID and a model as null. Then we have this to convert this to string, because when we provide category ID, that ID is good, and we don't want to pass the good. We want to convert it to string before we can pass it on. So we have a simple method here to handle that. So when we call this method, it's going to assign the value to this as a parameter to the property that we have set over here. So call this method, pass on the ID, which is GUID, and you're going to return string and assign it to the ID property that we have. Okay. So these are the models that we need currently to assist us work. Now let's see the next thing to do. The next thing that we're going to be doing is we need to install some packages which would assist us work with our client. Let's first save all this. Let's go to our client, as a Wasm, and under properties or dependencies, you can go to manage and get packages to install them. But well, I do have them already, so that's what I'm going to do. I can just save our project. What we are going to do next is to install some packages which we will be needing in order to create our client. So let's go and do that. So let's install HTTP extension to our client's library, and also we're going to be working with cookie. So we need to install that package as well. Let's do that to this client's library, because we're going to add this project to this. So all packages installed on this client can be used here. Now let's go to the client, that is the Blazor WebAssembly, and install some packages also. All right, so let's fix this issue first. I think we have, so let's make sure we fix that error. All right, so these are the packages that we have installed. When you check the Blazor WebAssembly, we have Blazor type ahead, which we're going to be using for our clients search, and created by Crescenti. And we are installing authorization so we can have access to this authorized component. Then we need packages here for our input component. Then we need system.identity model so we can get claims from our JWT token, which we are going to consume. When you check our client, we are doing same. We install HTTP extension so we can create a client factory. And in that, we need to also we want to use cookie storage here so we can store our token in there. So we have to install, I've created a package which enables you to work with cookie storage in WebAssembly. So we need to also install this package. Okay, so now we are done with these packages. Let's go to our client. That's a Blazor WebAssembly. But before, we need to create our service here. Now this service is going to consume the API. So let's work with that first. Now in our service that we're going to create, we're going to be creating another class which is going to be a helper. And this helper is going to support the service. They're going to provide some essentials to the service. So let's build that. And all of this are going to happen in the client library. So let's first add our helper folder. If you check this helper that we are creating, it is for the support and HTTP client. In here, we are having two interfaces. The first one is going to get a public client, and the second one is getting us private client, which is asynchronous. Now, why do I create this? The reason is, we're going to have role-based authorization in our component. So before you make an API call, some endpoints are protected, others too are not protected. With endpoints which are not protected, we're going to be using a public client to make a call to them. Now, with protected endpoint, we need to add JWT token to the header of the client. And in that, this is going to handle that. So as soon as you call this service, it's going to return an HTTP client with the token already added to the header. So you don't need to manually add it before you make a call. As soon as you call this, it has been added already. So that's the reason why we are creating these two interfaces here. Let's implement them. So before we can implement this, we also need another service in here. So let's maintain this. Let's create that service first. Then we come back. So this service is going to actually help us to get a token, although we're going to have the token from the API. We're going to keep it in the cookie section, that is from the browser. And now this service here is going to help us achieve that. So we can get only the token. We can also get only the refresh token in case you want to make an refresh token call. Then we can also form the token. This token formation will allow us to combine the two tokens together and make it as one, so we can set it to the cookie storage. And at the end, we can also remove it. So once you have this interface, let's go and implement it. Now, in order for us to implement this, we need to get access to a cookie service. So the package that we installed, the package that I created that we installed, it has an interface exposed, and that is what we can use here. But before we do that, we need to go and register that first. So from our client, let's go to our dependency. Let's add this project and choose this client library. Once it is added, we can go to program.cs file and add this service. All right, so this is what we are doing for our this service. You can see from here we're injecting our cookie storage interface from the package that we installed, and in there it gives us access to get async and remove async and also set. So here we want to form the token. In order for us to save this the cookie, we don't want to create two keys. We want to have one key, but it has the combination of the token and the refresh token. So you can see we are joining it and are returning it in the form of string. Now with this, we want to generate the token. So we could have implemented this twice, but we want to get rid of duplication. So we created a private method. Now this is surrounded by a track catch. In case there's any issue from splitting, we're going to return now. But in case it isn't, we want to get a token from the local or the cookie storage. When we have it, we want to split it with this, and I want to return the position, which could be 0 or 1. 0 is the first one, 1 is the second one. So here we call this method, we pass the refresh token, which is going to be the second one. Then our token is going to be the first one. So this is our refresh token for the second, and GWT token will be the first one. Then we want to set it. So under setting the cookie, we need to provide the key, the days, and that is the value, the days, and also the path. So we need to set up and provide these values here. Okay, so once you have this service created, we need to go and register this token service. So let's go to our program and do that. As we are done here, we need to inject this token service into our client factory class that we created. Now this client helper enable us to get a client and also get the token and add it to the header if you are getting the private one. So let's go and handle this. So in order for us, you see from here, we inject our interface, we inject our token service. This is coming from the Microsoft data extension that we created. That's for HTTP client. Now in there, we want to get our public, and now with our public, and here we have our private. That's right. So with our public, we need to return create client. Now this need to specify a key for this. Now in order to write the key, we don't want to put it here, because you're going to be using the same thing in the program.cs file when registering this HTTP client. So it is advisable to put it in a static class. So let's go and handle that. All our hard-coded strings, let's put them in that file. Okay, let's name this as constant. So this should come in the helper folder. So in here, we're going to have a lot of things that we need to specify in here. I think we need to create it once so we do not visit this whilst you're working with the other ones, busy working with them. So let's create for products. We're going to specify all our endpoint, our category to our endpoint. We're going to specify our API call type. That is what we need in order to specify the type of verb, which will be a call be made based on the type of code that we're going to provide. And then we're going to provide a cookie which contains the name, the path, and now the number of days, a default we will also provide authentication as well. All right, so let's start with this. Now, since I have this already prepared hand, let's create a class for each. So this could be, or should be, a static. So as we've done here, we can go ahead, grab this, paste it, and change this to category. Because when you check, our endpoints are the same, so we need to make sure we have the controller over here. Now let's specify our own for cookie. So here we need to also provide 3 properties for cookie. Let's do it. Now here we are setting our days to 1 because when you check our token service, when we're working with the API, the lifetime of the token is 2 hours. So it's not even a day. So it is okay. So the day must be greater than the number of the time period for the expiration of the token. So this time around, talking about 2 hours to 1 day. So it matches, it's good. You can decide to also specify it with 1 day and increase this, or making it just a day. That's also fine. Now let's do same for, so we're having our product API endpoint, we're having our category, so we're also going to be needing our authentication for our login. So let's do that. So that is this. We need a type of authentication, which is going to be bearer. This is our register and login endpoint, and this is our refresh token endpoint. So I made it as revive token. Yes, a doctor is going to revive a soul. Okay, so we have this. Now the next thing that we need to create here is an API client key. So that's what we're going to be using. What we need after this. So once you have all this created, we can go ahead. This is what we need, an API client and also the constants. That's the class name. So let's go to our token service. Oh, not this. That's an HTTP client helper. And in here, we can talk of constants dot. Then we have our API client dot name. That is what we need. Okay, so after we are done creating this, you want to return an instance of this. So when you check this from the get private client async 2, we want to create an instance of this client factory to have an instance of an HTTP client. Now when we have that, we're going to retrieve a token from the cookie. And in case it is null, it means you want to return this default client, which is the client created over here. Then in case it isn't, then we have the token at hand. We create new client and then append this header to this new client and return it. Maybe you can also, the client that we have created over here, you can also append the header to this client, which will also work. After we are done creating this, we need to go in and register this. So let's go and register this client helper. Now we're going to create a main one. That is a way of making the API call. So we have a module created already. So let's go and create that interface as well. Now you can see from the helpers, we are creating interface implementation. The reason why we are doing that is we could have created only a single class to handle that. But in case in the near future we want to implement testing to this, then we can work with the sense we are having an interface with the implementation being bound together. It will work. So that's the reason why we want to do that. Now let's create our API call helper, the same folder. So I'm actually giving the name so that it becomes clear and readable to you. I'm not giving, well, I don't know how you feel about my namings. I want to make it simple for you to at least so that when you read, you can understand. So this is an API call helper. It's helping in making an API call. Sounds simple, right? But you can change it to any name at all, which is meaningful to the context that you're working on. Great. So this is an interface. Now let's go and implement our or create our interface that we want here. These are the three interfaces that we need to help us or support an API call. All the time, we want to return a HTTP response message so we can read our content from it. And then here we're going to provide a T model to this because here we created as dynamic and we must actually provide a T model so we can cast it to that dynamic property that we issued. When you check our API call model that we created earlier on, we specify dynamic property here. We're going to hold dynamic models. Okay, then in here we're having a response. That's get service response. Now we're having two responses. We're having service response and our login response. So we want to pass it on any of them to read that from this content. Then we're going to get a specific response, a service response, in case connection could not be established to the API. We want to get this. We are creating them here so we don't need to repeat ourselves all the time. Okay, we want to skip that. Let's go implement this. All right, so this is what we are doing here. Now, when we check this, this model comes in with an API call type. Now, when we check our API call model, where is it? If we check our API call, we see it has a type. Now, this type is going to either be get, update, delete, or put, right? So when we check from our constant, we specify the type in there. So check here. We have an API client type. No, not about this one. API call type. We haven't get, post, delete, and update. And we see based on this or based on each, we're going to have a different call. So that's why we are switching them in our helper that we created. I can't even find the helper. That's an API helper, this one. So in case it is post, the type that we're going to come, we are switching. In case it is post, we want to make it a post call. In case it is update, do same, that is put. In case it is delete, do that. In case it is get. Now with get, we may have get or get by ID. By simply we are having get here. So we need to check. In case the ID is not null, it means we are making a call to get by ID. But in case it is not, it means we're making a call to get, meaning you're going to get everything. So we're going to use this ternary operator here to check. In case it isn't null, then we want to assign it. In case it isn't, it is null, then replace it with null. And that's what we are having over here. So the route will be here. And in case this is null, here is going to be empty. So nothing will be appended. And we're going to make a call to that endpoint. Great. But in case there's try error, then we're going to catch it and return null. So instead of an HTTP response message, it's going to be null. And we can go ahead and check it in our service that we're going to be using this helper. Okay. Now let's go and handle this connection error. So, when your server is not working, when the server is down, a call won't be made. So you cannot have access to this response status code to check whether it was accessed or not. So in this case, we're going to try that. We're going to handle a try catch. And in case we catch it, it means when a connection could not be established, then we want to return this. Now let's also get a service here. Now the service is going to come from this. So you can see this returning HTTP response message. So based on the context that we want, the T response, we want to convert this to that response. So let's do that here. So the T response that I have provided here, this could be a list, enumerable of a model, or it could be just a service response or login response. Okay, so in order to get rid of this, maybe we can do something like, then at the end, return that. Okay, so with this service that we have created as helper, let's go in and register this as well, so we do not forget. So with all these helpers being put in place, let's go and handle our category and our product services. So with this interface, we can go to our API and then grab the service interfaces and paste it here. Now let's go and implement this. So we are going to implement the interfaces that we created for our add product or add category, delete category, get all, get by ID, and also delete. And in that we need to implement our client because our client is going to give us access to public and private. We're also going to have an API call helper who is going to give us access to making a client to a controller call, right? That's an API call. So once we have these two guys over here, let's go and start implementing our services. So I need to check now for add. Now add is, this should be private. Why am I saying it should be private? Because only administrator or authorized user can do it. You cannot go in there and in a service, you can just go in as a normal user to delete category or to add category. No, this is protected. So only get all and I get by ID will become, and also get product by category will become open to public. So these three are what? Private. So let me just, we can group them by private and public. So everyone can have access to this endpoint. I hope it's clear. Now let's go and implement our add category. So when you check our add async method, this is what we are implementing. Now we're creating a private client. After that, you want to populate our API call model, whereby we specify our route, because this is going to be add, right? So it's post. So under category, we're going to add, which is going to access to category/add. Then we have our type, which is going to be the post. We have our client, and ID is not, because we're not going to make delete or get by ID. So set the ID as null. And I provide a model, because it's going to be a post, you must provide model. And now this model here is coming from create category. So with this create category, we must also provide it over here as a type, which is going to be typecasted to this model that we're going to have, because this model is dynamic. We need to typecast it so we can have access to this instance. Great. All right, after that, we're going to make a call, and now here with the response, we're going to check in case it is null. Remember that we introduced try catch in case it catches an issue, failing to connect to an API, then you're going to return this connection. In case it isn't, then I want to read the response, and I convert this response as a service response, and I'll return to the user, because this method is returning service response. Okay. Now this approach that we are using, we're going to do the same thing to all the endpoints that we have in here. So when you look at this, we can go ahead and ungrab this. From the delete async, let's make a copy of this and let's paste it. Okay, now you see from the delete async, we are providing an ID. We are not having model as this. The add async, that's where you provide a model. So it means here we're going to have an issue with the delete. In order to solve that, we need to create a dummy model which will be used against this. And we're going to specify the ID. Let's see how you're going to work with that. So from the delete, we create a private async. We populate our API call. So instead of add, that will be delete. API call type is delete. Then we have our client as private. Now instead of the ID, you're going to say there's an ID. Now here, this is good and now this is string. So this one is impossible. So instead of converting this, let's clear this. And now with this model, we don't have any model here. So this is going to be now, right? But with this, are we going to maintain this create category model? No. So let's go to our models. And now where we have an API call, let's also add a dummy one. And that is this, just dummy class. Let's grab the name. Let's go back to our service and then let's replace this here. And that is all. We are good. We are going to return service response. So we have the response type returned as it makes success. Now with the ID, how do you work with the ID? After we are done with this, we can go ahead, grab the API call. Then we're going to say toString and let's specify the ID that is coming in. We're going to set it to the ID over here. And boom, that is it. For update, let's grab this. And lastly, okay, we have get product by category 2. So we can do same with this type delete. So let's get this. Now with this get or async, this is going to be public. So it's not going to be private because an authenticated user can even get access to this client and make a call, because that's where we're going to make a call to get product in categories and display them in the UI. Then with the return type, you can see that here we're going to return IEnumerable of category. So we can grab this IEnumerable and pass it on here. And now with this, you can see here we are not. So instead of returning this, we can throw this. We can either return null, because in case connection could not be made, we can throw this exception. So maybe we can say that let's grab this. Or maybe if we don't want to throw this exception, that's going to get. So in case you could not, we want to return just an empty array. Okay. And we are good. Get by ID. Let's grab same here. So it's going to get category. So it should take off the IEnumerable. And that is the same thing as get. We need to provide an ID. There's a guild, so we need to do same as we did here. We can grab this. And lastly, want to check this get product by ID. It is the same thing. So we can grab this. Saying this is an IEnumerable, we need to grab this one. Okay, so that is what we're doing. So we are getting product by category, and here we specify our client, we populate our models, we specify our ID, then we're going to make a call, and I'm going to check the response, and now read it according to what we want to return up here. We're doing the same thing to get by ID too, because see, we're having the same thing, and we pass on the model once we have populated that in here. You read the response, which is the term of what get single category. The same thing applies to get category. We're doing same over here. And now when we check this update, is just an update which is put over here, and that's what we're going to be using for this API call type. We specify our update model, then we're going to read our response. And we did the same thing to the delete and also the add. All right, so that is a way to handle this category service. Now we're going to do the same thing to handle our product service. So I think we can make a copy of this and edit it. What do you think? Yeah, so let's see how we can work with our product service as well. So with here, let's make a copy of this. You want to add product, you want to get product, you want to do the same thing as you've done here. Okay, so in our category service, let's make a copy and now do that edit. So let's go and implement this service that we have created. So we can just copy and paste what we have in the category over here. Let's do that. That is it. So you see that copy and paste is quite simple and interesting. Yes. So we are updating it and we are specifying the same thing as we did in the category. So I need not to explain this again because I've done it already, isn't it? We provide all the properties to the models and make an API call with a specific model that you want to pass it on to this. So we can typecast all this and return the content as you read based on the model that you want to return. Okay. So that is this one. Now, once we have a service created for both category and product, let's go and register them. Alright, so stay tuned for the next video.